When my daughter Clara sent me to a nursing home, I thought my heart couldn't break any further. After all, I had already given up 30 years of my life, my back, my health, everything, to pay off the house she now called hers. But by the very next day, she was the one staring at a bill that wiped the smirk off her face. Don't forget to like the video and subscribe for more real-life revenge stories. Listen, complete story, and comment below. Do you think Edward did the right thing? And if you've faced something similar, share your story in the comments. We'd love to hear it. I'm Edward, 68 years old. For 3 decades, I worked as a construction foreman. Rain, snow, blistering summers didn't matter. I broke my back so that my daughter would never have to wonder where she'd sleep at night. The mortgage was my badge of honor. Every nail hammered, every dollar saved. It was for that house, our home. But lately, home didn't feel like mine. Each morning I'd wake at 6 out of habit, shuffling into the kitchen to brew coffee. I'd fix the squeaky door, oil the old gate, or patch up the loose tiles in the bathroom. Little things, but they kept me busy. I'd call Clara sometimes. "Hey, sweetheart, you free for lunch today?" She'd reply with a clipped, "Maybe next week, Dad." I'm busy. Next week never came. The few times she did visit, her words stung sharper than any injury I'd suffered on the job site. She'd wander through the living room, running her hands along the furniture, inspecting it like a buyer at an open house. "Honestly, Dad," she said once, her eyes scanning the walls, "this place is going to need a full remodel when it's mine. New paint, new flooring, everything. It's kind of outdated." I remember staring at her, the coffee mug trembling in my hands. Outdated? This was the home where she took her first steps, the kitchen table where I taught her long division, the backyard where she'd played with her dog Benny till the sun went down. Outdated. But I swallowed the hurt. What else could I do? She was my only child. The final blow came on a gray Thursday morning. Clara pulled up in her shiny SUV, barely cutting the engine before calling out, "Come on, Dad, we're going for a drive." Her tone was brisk, businesslike. I climbed into the passenger seat without asking questions. As we drove, I noticed she wasn't making small talk. No, "How are you feeling?" No, "Did you eat breakfast?" Just silence, the kind that presses against your chest. Then, as the car slowed in front of a building, my stomach turned. The sign read, "Willow Pines Nursing Home." I looked at her. "Clara, what is this?" She didn't even flinch. "Dad, it's time. You can't keep living alone. It's not safe. This place will take care of you. Besides," she smirked, eyes flicking toward the rearview mirror, "you'll love it here, and I'll finally have less to worry about." Less to worry about. That's what she called getting rid of me. I didn't argue. I didn't cry. I just sat there watching through the window as the house I had bled for disappeared behind us. The streets blurred, but the image of our front porch, the roses I planted for my late wife, the cracked driveway I swore I'd fix next spring, all of it burned into my memory as it faded away. By the time the car pulled into the nursing home lot, my jaw was set. Clara thought she had won. She thought she had tossed me aside like an old coat, clearing her path to the house she already imagined as her own. But as I stepped out of that car, I whispered under my breath, "She thinks she's won." What she didn't know was that the very next day I'd send her something that would turn her smile into silence: the mortgage bill. When I first arrived at the nursing home, I thought the worst part would be the loneliness. But within 24 hours, I discovered something that cut deeper than abandonment. My own daughter had planned this betrayal for months, and she wasn't just after my freedom, she was after my house. The first night at Willow Pines was restless. The walls smelled faintly of disinfectant. The hallway lights flickered like a dying bulb, and every creak of the floor reminded me I wasn't at home anymore. I clutched my cane, staring out the window at the dark sky, trying to convince myself this was temporary. The next morning, I heard a familiar voice echoing down the hall. Clara. I shuffled closer to the doorway, careful not to make noise. She was on the phone, her voice sharp and confident in a way she never used with me. "Yeah, Mark," she said, lowering her tone, but not enough. "Now that the old man's out of the house, we can finally move forward. I'll refinance, flip it, and we're free. He won't even last a year in here." My hand tightened on the cane so hard my knuckles turned white. "Free?" She called my sacrifice, 30 years of sweat and pain, her ticket to freedom. I leaned against the wall, my chest rising and falling in slow, heavy breaths. I wanted. When Clara betrayed me, I thought the pain came from her words. But the truth is, the pain came from the memories, because every scar on my body told the story of what I gave up for her. And now those same sacrifices were being used to bury me. I remember the early years, when Clara was just a little girl with pigtails and a smile that could melt steel. Back then I was working brutal night shifts at the steel mill, 12 hours on my feet, sparks flying, the roar of machines rattling my bones. My co-workers would clock out for dinner, but me? I'd skip meals just to save a few dollars. Every extra dollar went into the mortgage, brick by brick, dollar by dollar, because I promised myself that Clara would never grow up wondering if we had a roof over our heads. There were nights I came home drenched in sweat and dust, my back screaming, my knuckles raw. I'd open the door to find her asleep on the couch, her homework spread out, a pencil still in her tiny hand, and I'd whisper, "One day, sweetheart, all of this will be yours." When she turned 10, she begged for piano lessons. We couldn't afford them, not really, but I cut my lunches down to a thermos of black coffee and half a sandwich. 3 months of sacrifice later, she was sitting at that old upright piano, her little fingers trembling over the keys. The look in her eyes when she hit her first perfect note, that was worth more than any meal I'd ever skipped. I still hear that music when I close my eyes. Then came her graduation. God, I'll never forget that day. Clara walked across the stage in her cap and gown, smiling so wide the whole auditorium lit up. Parents clapped politely, but me? I was on my feet, shouting, whistling, clapping louder than anyone else. Tears rolled down my face as I thought, she's the first in the family to graduate college. She made it. I remember squeezing her hand afterward and saying, "Every dream I had, Clara, I buried it so you could live yours, and I'd do it all over again." She smiled, but she didn't understand the weight of those words. Not then. Years later, when her mother passed, I doubled down on being both father and mother. I cooked, I cleaned, I worked overtime, anything to make sure Clara never felt alone. I told myself the sacrifices didn't matter. That one day, when I was old and gray, Clara would look after me the way I looked after her. That was the deal, unspoken but understood. But standing in that nursing home hallway, overhearing her plan to sell the house, I realized the truth. She hadn't just forgotten the sacrifices. She had erased them. Every blister I earned, every night I spent working instead of resting, every tear I swallowed so she could smile, all of it meant nothing to her, and in that moment I felt something shatter inside me. A lifetime of love, loyalty, and trust crumbled into dust. I whispered into the empty room, every scar on these hands was for her. Every dream I had was buried so she could live hers, and she buried me instead. But then I straightened my back, gripped my cane like steel, and thought, she buried me too soon. When I overheard my daughter plotting to sell my house, I thought I was finished. What could a broken old man do from inside a nursing home? But by the end of that week, I wasn't just her victim anymore. I was her worst nightmare. For 2 days I sat in that sterile room at Willow Pines, stewing in silence. Rage burned in me like fire, but it was buried under the weight of something heavier, hopelessness. I stared at the cracks in the ceiling, asking myself, is this how it ends? 30 years of sacrifice tossed away like trash? The thought clawed at my chest. Maybe Clara was right. Maybe I wouldn't last a year in here. One night, Nurse Lila walked in with my medication. She was younger, kind-eyed, the sort of person who treated the residents like people instead of chores. She noticed the storm in my face. "You've been quiet, Edward," she said softly, setting the pills on the tray. I shrugged. Not much left to say. My own daughter buried me while I'm still breathing. Her expression hardened. Maybe it's not too late to fight back. Those words hit me harder than a hammer to the chest. Fight back. No one had said that to me in years. I looked up at her, my voice shaking. What can a man like me do now? She's got the papers, the lawyers, the power. Lila leaned closer, her voice steady. You've got something stronger. You've got the truth. Don't let her write your ending. That night, I didn't sleep. Instead, I pulled out an old notepad from the drawer and began scribbling names, dates, and numbers. There was one name I circled 3 times, Martin Hale. Martin wasn't just any name. He was an old friend, a lawyer I'd known since our kids played Little League together. We hadn't spoken in years, but I knew one thing. He hated injustice as much as I did. The next morning, while the staff bustled about, I made my first secret move. I asked the nurse if I could use the private phone near the lobby to call my insurance. She nodded, none the wiser. When Martin picked up, his voice was older, but still sharp. "Edward, my God, it's been years. What's wrong?" I gripped the phone tight. "Martin, my daughter stole my life's work. She's planning to sell the house. If she wants war, I'll show her what real war looks like. But I need your help." There was a pause, then a low chuckle. "Edward, you always were a fighter. Don't worry. If she used loopholes, we'll use the law. Send me everything you can remember. Dates, deeds, bank accounts. We'll build this brick by brick." That call lit a fire inside me. The plan began to form. Martin would dig through the old ownership deeds, track the mortgage history, and verify every transfer of power. Meanwhile, I listed out my assets. Old savings accounts, a small pension, even a trust I'd once set up in Clara's name. The very tools she thought she controlled would become my weapons. Each day, I played the role of the tired old man at Willow Pines, but every night I worked in secret with Martin. Paperwork passed quietly between us. Strategies whispered through late-night calls. The world thought I was done. Clara thought I was powerless. But in reality, the war had already begun. Martin Hale, my old lawyer and friend, was the first call I made. We met in secret, late one evening, in his office. He laid out the paperwork across the table, his glasses catching the dim light. "Edward, if we reroute every bill and deed properly," Martin said, "she'll have no clue until the hammer falls." I nodded slowly. "If she wants the house so badly, let her pay for it, every last dollar." The first step was deceptively simple. I authorized Martin to reroute every property tax bill, mortgage notice, and maintenance expense directly under Clara's name. From that day forward, her mailbox became a financial time bomb. At the same time, I withdrew my savings from the joint account she had quietly linked behind my back. When she tried to access it again, she'd find nothing but air, just like the love she once had for her own father. But here's the part I savored the most: the performance. Every time Clara visited me at the nursing home, I played the role of the grateful old man. I let my shoulders sag. I forced a weak smile. I even thanked her for taking care of everything. One afternoon, she walked in wearing a new designer coat, paid for with my stolen money. She leaned over my wheelchair, patting my hand as if I were some helpless fool. "Don't worry, Dad," she said sweetly, her voice dripping with hypocrisy. "The house is in good hands." I looked into her eyes, forcing a shaky smile. Out loud I whispered, "Yes, in good hands." But inside, my blood burned as the words echoed in my mind. Yes, mine. That moment was electric. I wanted to laugh, to roar, to shout the truth in her face, but I didn't. Revenge isn't loud. It's silent, creeping, and patient. Every piece was falling into place. Martin handled the legal filings with surgical precision. Each rerouted bill, each redirected notice, each quiet transfer of ownership into the trust we had revived from decades ago. Clara thought she had seized control, but she was unknowingly digging herself into a financial pit. And me? I just kept smiling. I played the role of the weak, forgotten father. But behind the curtain, I was orchestrating every step of her downfall. If she thought she had already won, she was dead wrong. Because this was only the beginning of the trap. When my own daughter threw my belongings into trash bags and bragged about it, I thought I had reached rock bottom. But within a week, I discovered she wasn't just disrespectful. She was selling off my life piece by piece. That's when I realized betrayal isn't just cruel. It's calculated. And if she thought I'd stay silent, she had another thing coming. It started with little things. One of the nurses at the home mentioned, "Your daughter came by your old place. Movers carried out boxes." My chest tightened. Those boxes weren't just junk. They held 40 years of sweat, tools I bought with every extra dollar I saved after long shifts at the steel mill. Later that day, Martin slid his phone across the table. "Dad," he whispered, "I think you need to hear this." On the screen was a recording, Clara's voice, sharp and smug, dripping with arrogance. "She doesn't even blink when she talks like this," Martin explained. And then I heard it. Clara's laugh, cold as a blade. I tossed his dusty junk out, finally redecorating the living room. And guess what? I sold his rusty tools online. Easy money. He's rotting in that home, and I'm living free. Her boyfriend chuckled in the background, replying, "Smart move, babe. He won't last long anyway. Might as well enjoy it now." I froze. The blood pounded in my ears. My hands clenched into fists so tight my knuckles cracked. That woman wasn't just my daughter anymore. She was my enemy. I whispered, almost to myself, "You won't be living free much longer." The betrayal dug deep. Those tools? They weren't just rusty junk. Each wrench, hammer, and saw had a story. I built Clara's tree house with them when she was 7, fixed her first car with them when she was 16, and now she hawked them like they were scrap metal. But here's the part she didn't know. Martin and I had already started rerouting everything. Bills, accounts, even legal documents. Every move she made, every arrogant word she spoke, we documented. The recording Martin captured wasn't just gossip. It was ammunition. Still, the pain burned hotter than the plan. I replayed her words at night, over and over. "He's rotting in that home." That was her description of me. Her father, the man who carried her on his shoulders when she was little, the man who skipped vacations so she could go to college. But then something shifted inside me. That recording didn't just sting, it steeled me. I wasn't the man rotting in a corner. I was the man waiting, the man calculating, and Clara, in her arrogance, was handing me the rope she'd eventually hang herself with. The next time she visited, she walked in with her designer handbag, perfume strong enough to fill the hall. She patted my arm and smirked. "Don't worry, Dad. The house looks better now. Fresher, younger. You'd be proud." I looked her straight in the eye, forcing a smile so calm it almost startled her. "Oh, I'm proud, Clara," I said softly. "Very proud." Because deep down, I knew what she didn't. Every laugh she shared, every cruel brag, every dollar she made from what she stole, it was all piling up. And soon, the weight of it would come crashing down on her head. She thought she was living free. But in truth, she was living on borrowed time. I had spent my life saving every penny, building a home, and raising Clara as best I could after her mother passed. And now? She was bragging about selling my tools, mocking me to her boyfriend, acting like I was already dead. That was the moment I swore she'd never touch another cent of mine again. The first step was the money. With Martin's help, God bless that boy, I signed every dollar of my savings into an irrevocable trust. Clara's name was erased from my accounts permanently. She would never inherit a dime. The lawyer slid the papers toward me and said, "Once this is filed, no one can touch it, not even her." I pressed my pen down so hard the tip nearly tore through the page. Next came the surveillance. If Clara wanted to play games, I was going to collect every piece of proof she left behind. Martin set up small recorders and cameras at the house while she was out. Each week, he showed me the footage. Clara dragging out my boxes, laughing with her boyfriend as she listed my tools for sale online, typing messages about how she was finally free of the old man. I clenched my jaw every time. She had no idea that her arrogance was documenting her downfall, but I didn't stop there. I wanted witnesses, people who could testify to how she treated me. So I spoke with the nursing home staff. I told them, if she comes here, pay attention. Watch how she talks to me, how she ignores me, how she never asks about my health." Several nodded solemnly. They had already noticed her coldness. Now, they were ready to stand with me when the time came. Then I set the financial trap. I stopped paying the mortgage and utilities, but here's the twist. Everything was still in her name. Every unpaid bill, every overdue notice, every red-stamped envelope landed directly in Clara's mailbox. The stack grew week after week. The more she ignored them, the deeper the hole she dug. One afternoon, Martin brought me copies of the arrears. "She's 3 months behind," he said, laying the papers on the table. I smiled for the first time in weeks. Good. Let her feel the pressure. Let her sweat. Every piece was falling into place. Clara thought she had locked me away, powerless and forgotten, but she didn't know I had been preparing quietly, brick by brick, building a wall that would eventually crush her arrogance. I whispered to myself that night before bed, the house she stole, the freedom she bragged about, the money she thought was hers, soon all of it will collapse right on her head. The trap was baited, the evidence was stacked, the bills were piling, and Clara? She was still laughing, still posting pictures online of her new life, unaware that every step she took was leading her closer to ruin. And if she thought losing my tools was the end of it, she had another thing coming. The day I signed my savings into an irrevocable trust, I felt a weight lift from my chest. That money, 40 years of sweat, double shifts, and skipped vacations, was finally beyond Clara's greedy reach. "This isn't for her," I told Martin, my old friend and lawyer. "It's for the grandkids, for someone who actually deserves it." Martin smirked. "By the time she realizes it's gone, she'll already be drowning in bills." That was the plan, but it wasn't enough to block her. I wanted proof, undeniable, humiliating proof of what she really was. So Martin set up surveillance. Small cameras in the corners of my old house, voice recorders in the nursing home drawer where I kept a few $100s. Within days, we caught her red-handed. "Dad doesn't need all this cash anyway," Clara's voice sneered on one recording. "It's better in my account." The sound of her laughing with her boyfriend as she pocketed the money made my stomach twist. Every new recording was a dagger in my heart, but also fuel for the fire. At the nursing home, I prepared the staff. "She doesn't visit to see me," I told Nurse Helen one afternoon. "She visits to see what she can take." Helen nodded gravely. "We've noticed. Don't worry, Mr. Harland. When the time comes, we'll speak up." That was all I needed. Witnesses. Clara thought no one was watching. She was wrong again. Then came the bait. I let the bills pile up intentionally. The mortgage arrears, property taxes unpaid, even the utilities stacked one after another, all redirected to Clara's mailbox. By the third week, I knew she'd open the box and feel the world collapsing. Sure enough, she stormed into the nursing home days later, waving papers. "Dad, what the hell is this?" she snapped, slamming the overdue notices on my lap. "They're threatening foreclosure." I leaned back in my chair, calm as ice. "Well, Clara, you said you'd handle the house. I assumed you were on top of it." Her face turned crimson. "Do you realize how much this is going to cost me?" I looked her dead in the eye. "Every cent you stole from me, Clara, will come back tenfold." She scoffed, shaking her head. "You're senile. Nobody believes you." What she didn't know was that Martin already had hours of her recorded thefts, and the staff standing at the doorway had heard her tantrum. Another nail in the coffin. But here's the part Clara never saw coming. She thought money was my weakness. She thought she could bleed me dry. In reality, I was bleeding her. Every day, more arrears. Every week, new legal notices. And every time she came to confront me, another witness overheard her selfish rants. If she thought the trust and the surveillance were bad, she had another thing coming, because this was just the preparation. The real execution, the moment where her lies would crumble in front of everyone, was still ahead, and I was counting the days. The morning it all snapped into place, Clara wasn't expecting anything unusual. She had gotten used to the house being hers, the big oak table, the leather recliner she'd sneered at, even the garden roses she never watered. But then the letter came. She tore it open at the kitchen counter, coffee sloshing out of her mug. The words hit her like a sledgehammer mortgage statement. Past due balance, $42,870.63. Her jaw went slack. She flipped the pages, panic growing with each line, arrears, penalties, foreclosure warnings. And then, folded neatly inside, was a handwritten note, my handwriting. If I'm paying for my stay, you can pay for yours. The house was never yours. Only the debt is. I imagined her face when she read it. The daughter who once tossed me into a nursing home like yesterday's trash, now staring down the reality that the roof over her head was never hers to begin with. She had paraded me around, telling relatives, "Dad's old, he doesn't understand paperwork anymore." But I had understood perfectly. I had left the deed in my own name. She'd never had the house, just the bills. That was the first punch. The second landed before she could catch her breath. The doorbell rang, not a neighbor, not the mailman, 2 police officers. "Clara Donovan?" one asked, his tone clipped. She stammered, "Yes, what is this about?" "This is regarding financial fraud allegations filed against you. We'll need to ask some questions." Her voice rose, brittle with fake indignation. "Fraud? Against me? This is absurd. My father's senile." But I wasn't senile. Martin and I had prepared everything, bank statements showing her transfers, recordings of her calling me a burden to get rid of, even screenshots of her messages bragging about finally draining the old man dry. One of the officers handed her the folder. "The evidence says otherwise, ma'am." She flipped through, her hands trembling. Every lie she had told me, every dollar she siphoned, every sneer about me being dead weight, all cataloged, time-stamped, undeniable. I heard later from Martin, who was parked discreetly across the street, that she turned white as chalk. This is a misunderstanding," she whispered, voice cracking. The officer didn't blink. "Ma'am, financial exploitation of the elderly is a serious crime." For once, Clara had no clever insult, no smirk, no dismissive laugh. She had mocked me for years. "Old man, just sign what I tell you. You don't need to worry about details." Now those details were crushing her. And here's the part that still makes me smile. The neighbors gathered outside, curious. Clara had always boasted about how she took care of her father. Now they saw the truth. Her on the porch, hair messy, voice shrill, begging the officers not to take her in. Vindication doesn't always come with applause. Sometimes it comes in the silence of people finally seeing what you've endured. and the humiliation of your abuser standing exposed with nowhere to hide. As I sat in my nursing home room later that day, I thought of the words Clara once spat at me when I asked for my own money back. "Dad, you should be grateful I haven't thrown you out on the street." Now, with foreclosure looming and the law at her door, those words had come home to her, harder than I could have dreamed. I raised my cup of tea in a quiet toast. "Grateful, Clara? Oh, I am." The automatic doors of the nursing home slid open with a violent hiss. I didn't need to look up. I could hear her stilettos stabbing the floor like nails into a coffin. Clara, my daughter, my betrayer. She stormed in, her voice slicing through the quiet halls. "You ruined me, old man. You ruined everything. That house was supposed to be mine. The money was supposed to be mine." Heads turned, nurses froze. Even the frail residents lifted their eyes, sensing the storm. But I stayed seated at the long oak table in the visitors' lounge, my hands folded calmly, my heart beating steady. I had been waiting for this moment. I gestured to the chair opposite me. "Sit down, Clara." She slammed her purse onto the table instead. Her eyes were red, her makeup smeared, fury dripping from every pore. "You think this is funny?" she spat. "Because of you, the bank is hounding me. The police—" I cut her off with a single motion. From my briefcase, I spread the papers slowly across the table like a dealer laying out cards in a final game. Deeds, bank statements, the notarized ownership of the house, and on top of them, the letter from Martin's lawyer detailing every cent she had stolen. Her face drained of color. "This," I said quietly, tapping the documents, "is the truth you tried to bury. You took my home, my savings, and locked me away like I was already dead. But you forgot one thing. The house was never yours, only the debt." Her lips trembled. You wouldn't dare." I leaned closer, lowering my voice so only she could hear, but ensuring the room leaned in to catch every word. "You took my love, my trust, and you tried to bury me alive. Now, Clara—" I let the pause hang like a blade above her neck. "It's your turn." She lunged forward, snatching at the papers, but before she could tear them apart, the heavy footsteps arrived. 2 uniformed officers stepped into the lounge. The sight of their badges froze her hand midair. "Clara Whitmore?" one asked firmly. She spun around. "This is a mistake. He's manipulating you. He's old, senile. He doesn't know what he's signing." The officer held up the warrant. "We have evidence of identity theft, financial fraud, and elder abuse. You need to come with us." Her scream cracked through the room. "No, I was supposed to have everything. He owed me after all these years. You don't understand. I deserved it." Every resident, every nurse, every staff member was watching now. The woman who paraded herself as the dutiful daughter was unraveling, her mask torn off in front of witnesses. I picked up one page from the table, a faded photograph I had kept tucked inside the deeds. It was her, 10 years old, sitting on my shoulders at the county fair, cotton candy in her hands. For a moment, my chest ached with the memory of the girl she used to be. But then I remembered the nursing home contract she had forced me to sign, the night she slammed the door in my face when I begged to come home. I let the photograph fall back to the table. My voice was steady, calm, final. "I gave you everything, and still it wasn't enough. Now, Clara, you've lost it all." The officers cuffed her wrists. She collapsed onto her knees, sobbing, mascara streaking down her cheeks like black rivers. "Daddy, please, don't let them take me, please." But I didn't move. As they dragged her out past the wide-eyed residents, I finally exhaled. Not in anger, not even in triumph, but in vindication. The daughter who tried to bury me alive was the one being carried out in chains. And for the first time in years, I felt free. When the police finally escorted Clara out of the nursing home, I followed them with slow, steady steps. She thrashed against their grip, her voice echoing through the sterile halls. "You're nothing without me," she screamed, her face twisted with fury. "Everything you had was because of me." For years I might have believed her, but not anymore. I tightened my grip on the folder in my hand, the deeds, the bank statements, the evidence of her betrayal, and I looked her in the eye one last time. My voice came out calm, almost too calm for the chaos surrounding us. "I was everything without you," I said, "and I still am." The words silenced her for a moment, and for the first time since this nightmare began, I saw fear in her eyes. She wasn't untouchable anymore. As the officers dragged her past gawking staff and residents, some shook their heads in disbelief. Others whispered prayers. I simply exhaled, as if years of weight had finally lifted from my chest. I walked out of that nursing home, not as the abandoned, forgotten man she had tried to bury, but as a free man. Every step felt lighter than the last. Outside, the late afternoon sun painted the sky in gold. I paused on the curb and looked down at the papers in my hands. They weren't just documents. They were my life reclaimed, my home, my dignity, my peace. I thought of the countless nights I had lain awake in that tiny room, wondering how my own daughter could strip me of everything I had built. I thought of my late wife, Mary, and how heartbroken she would have been to see her daughter turn into a vulture. But now justice had been served. Revenge. Ice cold, deliberate, and absolute. Later that evening, I returned to the house Clara had tried to steal from me. My house. The paint was peeling. The porch creaked under my weight, but it was mine. Every nail, every brick, every memory. I sat down on the old rocking chair, the wood groaning under my frame, and watched the sun sink below the horizon. For the first time in years, I felt at peace. A whisper escaped my lips, quiet, but filled with triumph. "Home, sweet home." I closed my eyes and let the words linger in the air. That house wasn't just four walls. It was where Mary and I had raised Clara, where we had celebrated birthdays and mourned losses. Clara had tried to turn it into her trophy, her proof of power, but tonight it stood as my victory. I imagined her in a cold cell, still shouting, still convinced the world owed her something. And I smiled. Revenge hadn't just been about payback. It had been about taking back my life, proving that no amount of cruelty could erase who I was. The betrayal had cut deep, yes, but the vindication ran deeper. As the last streaks of sunlight faded, I raised the glass of sweet tea I had poured for myself and held it in a quiet toast. "To justice," I murmured, "and to revenge best served cold." The night crept in, soft and quiet. For once I wasn't afraid of tomorrow, because tomorrow I would wake up in my own bed, in my own home, free. And Clara, she would wake up behind bars with nothing left to take. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like the video and subscribe for more real-life revenge stories. Comment below. Do you think Edward did the right thing? And if you've faced something similar, share your story in the comments. We'd love to hear it.